Ta-da! We're on. Okay, so I don't know how good the view of that board is. Maybe if I turn the light off, it might be better. No, it's too bright now. Looks like I'm behind a UFO. Ah, we come in peace. Anyway, okay, so the Great Retreat under Stalin. So it's called the Great Retreat because of Leon Trotsky, who was in exile. Okay, so Leon Trotsky was in exile. And obviously, he was a bit put out, being the whole expelled from the Communist Party thing by comrade Uncle Joe Stalin. He wasn't very happy, was he, Ben? Okay, certainly not. So he looked at the reforms, the social reforms by Stalin in the USSR as a great retreat, okay, as a pullback from what Lenin wanted. And I think the greatest and kind of go-to example we should use is that of women. Now, if you look at the propaganda differences between the early USSR and the later USSR, under Lenin and under Stalin, you can see there's a change. Women, female propaganda under Lenin, women are made to look a bit stronger. Look at her arms there; they're a bit thicker. Okay, I'm not saying they're like like a female bodybuilders, but certainly you can see she's got vigor and strength. And then you compare what a woman looked like under Stalin's regime. You can see certainly a more motherly, maternal image is shown there of a woman surrounded by children. Okay, so you can see that I'd say traditional conservative family values, which would have chimed certainly with the peasantry in the USSR, were renewed. And we know why. This was a pragmatic concern for Stalin. The population had plummeted with his purges and his liquidation of the kulaks and Holodomor. Okay, so he knew that a war was coming. Everyone could feel a Second World War brewing, and he wanted to prepare for that. One of the best ways to prepare for a war is to have an increased manpower in the country. And the more soldiers you have, usually the more effective you'll be in a war, if it's a war of attrition. So Hitler had the same ideas as well. So you can see Stalin and Hitler on the same page. Okay, they kind of have a kind of homogenous, I'd say, propaganda style around women. Now, women lost their right to have abortions, and divorces were made more difficult, more challenging. Men were also forced to pay 60% of their salary to childcare as child support to women. So this disincentivized divorce, okay, for men. And men were named and shamed if they had affairs or illegitimate children. So under Lenin, family was seen as a bourgeois construct. Under Stalin, free love and sex outside of marriage was seen as a bourgeois construct. Okay, so anything that is against the pragmatic or ideological sense of the leader of the USSR is always called a bourgeois construct. Now, moving on, education. Now, education under Lenin was completely chaotic. Okay, no subjects, no timetables. What was going on? Just a little bit of literacy and whatever the teacher wanted to teach. No exams. Yeah, I see your eyes light up there. No stress, eh? However, by implementing this, what this did was actually create a shortfall in qualified members of society, i.e. engineers. Now, Stalin had a clear vision for the USSR, and we all know about it, and it comes down to his 5-year plans, his rapid industrialization, his 100 years of progress in 10 years. And now, to achieve that, you must have a qualified workforce, or you have to go to other industrialized countries, i.e. capitalist countries, and pay for their experts to come over. Okay, now, that doesn't exactly fit with a communist ideal. So you want to be self-reliant. Okay, again, a kind of more Hitlerite idea chimes in here, a kind of version of autarky. Now, you can't have that unless you have a qualified workforce. So Stalin reintroduces timetables, examinations, which are hard to take. And so he has a more qualified workforce. And remember, if people came from working class backgrounds, true to proletarian backgrounds, they were prioritized for higher education. However, there was a high dropout rate for those people. All right. So not everything worked, but certainly I'd say greater educational progress was realized under Stalin, and Stalin became known as the teacher of the nation. There was also something else which Stalin wanted to liquidate, and that was illiteracy. So under Stalin, he made sure that literacy rates boomed in the USSR to support his 5-year plans. Okay, you need educated workers to have an industrial society. Now, moving on, religion. Now, this is kind of more of a theme of continuity between Lenin and Stalin. But usually what you notice about Lenin, if he institutes something, Stalin will institute it more cruelly. Now, Lenin was quite keen to take, let's say, the physical apparatus away from the churches and the mosques, okay, and basically replant them as cinemas or schools or some kind of secular building replacement was going on there, okay. So he basically asset stripped the church. However, he didn't seem to mind if people wanted to pray in private. He just didn't think it should be a public concern. Stalin is actually harsher, okay, especially during his purges in the 1930s when he becomes ever more paranoid. Now, what he actually metes out on the religious is a far greater restriction of religion. He sees anyone who is creating propaganda for religious purposes could be arrested or disappear. All right. Priests found themselves under renewed pressures and persecution. 40,000 churches and 20,000 mosques by 1941 had been destroyed effectively, okay, or replaced. All right. So you can see there's a theme of continuity there, and it goes back to Marxist ideology. Religion is the opium of the people, and it really fits in with the narrative of the Stalinist purges in the 1930s. Okay, where he sees enemies of the state anywhere, and priests were certainly seen to be very dangerous. However, despite this, religiosity did not diminish. If anything, there's kind of like a grudging, no, we're going to keep on to our Orthodox beliefs or our Islamic beliefs, but probably more privately or in secret. All right, people would have been more careful about this. Nonetheless, in a census, a minority of people, I think 1 million people, did profess to be religious in the USSR, despite the Stalinist purges. So that showed that you can't destroy an idea, okay? You cannot destroy an idea. An idea is impossible to destroy, and some people will hold on to an idea for ideological reasons. Now, something else which Stalin does, which is quite interesting, is youth groups. So you have the Little Octoberists, which are very young children, and then you move on to the Young Pioneers, Be Prepared, Always Prepared, and then finally Komsomol. So basically, I think from the age of 9 until 28, there were youth organizations set up in the Soviet Union, okay, to fully indoctrinate people into the ideology of communism. Now, if you weren't a member of Komsomol, it was very unlikely that you would progress to have a career in the government or the party machinery of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, all right? So Komsomol was completely vital. And as well as being a vehicle of indoctrination, it was also a vehicle of socializing. The Young Pioneers was something that was basically communist scouts. So in Nazi Germany, I'm going to make another comparison because it's one from your GCSEs which you'd understand. You had the Hitler Youth and the League of Young Maidens. In the USSR, you don't only have Komsomol, I should put the other titles on the ball, but the Young Pioneers was certainly something that got people ready for maybe a more militarized society in case a war was happening. But Komsomol was seen to be kind of like a vital process of indoctrination, socialization, and social expectation upon young people. It was expected that you would join Komsomol. If you weren't a member, it would be very odd. Okay, it'd be very strange. Why is he or she not a member? People would be scratching their heads. And successful individuals from, again, genuinely proletarian backgrounds would be given a leg up in this process. Okay, so I think this was very successfully conducted under Stalin, and it really fit its purpose. And in the arts, this is somewhere where we again have a divide between Lenin and Stalin. Lenin allowed freedom. Art for art's sake was okay. Under Stalin, everything has to fit under the apparatus of the state. So all art should embody a kind of communist or socialist spirit. So what we see is a kind of restriction in the arts, and especially with the ever-growing personality cult around Stalin, poems are written for Stalin which kind of make him seem like a prophet or a god or a messiah of the Soviet Union. Okay, so you see him spoken about in elegiac verse. So it's quite interesting there. So art in the Soviet Union under Stalin, less freedom, more propaganda. Okay, art basically was propaganda. Poetry was propaganda. More physical art, visual art was propaganda to support the cult of personality around Stalin. And that's probably why if you look at the propaganda under the Stalinist regime, it's actually very beautiful. Actually looks very nice. Okay. Even if you don't agree with the message. Okay. Now, on that note, I think that's a great synopsis of the Great Retreat under Stalin. So I'm going to end there. Stop recording. Stop recording.